Hello my friends, and welcome to Tom's Tinkering and Adventures. Coming at you once again from the Global Domination Holiday Headquarters. Happy holidays everyone. Alright, well, we have a little project in the garage. Let's take a look at it. Got a little Yamaha TTR125 here. This is a friend of mine, it's his bike, or his kid's bike. And his son just upgraded from a little bit smaller bike to this one. They were riding it on the weekend, and now it's having some trouble shifting. So it's not shifting into all the high gears. And I think I've already identified what's wrong with it, but we're going to take a look at it. My friend told me he drained the oil out of it already because he thought I might have to pull the clutch apart to take a look at that, or the clutch cover. But I don't think I'm going to have to, but we'll take a look as well. And when he dropped it off, I noted that we have some oil residue here, so our fork seals are starting to go. We don't have fork seals, so I am going to show you how to clean these. And then I also noticed that the carburetor was kind of sitting at a funky angle, and we lost the screw for the clamp here. And I already had fixed, well, I haven't completely fixed it yet, this little rubber boot over the choke cable was all the way off. So we need to get that on there. And our spokes are loose on the back wheel. Here, I'll show you a simple trick that you can use to check spokes. Just grab yourself a little wrench. And I'm not really a musical person, but hear that one there? It just sounds dead. Hear the way these sound? So that's a simple way to check them. Of course, there's a torque value and all this stuff on these, but we're just going to snug them down a little bit so that they don't sound like that one. Doesn't sound bad. That one sounds dead. That one's so loose that you can move it. So we're going to tighten them up. So first thing I'm going to do before I start on anything is I'm going to go around and I'm going to spray some penetrating oil on all these spoke nipples. Yeah, I get to say nipples. Those are spoke nipples. Come on, get your mind out of the gutter. What the hell is wrong with you people? Anyway, we're going to spray some penetrating oil on those because they get really ignored. It's an item of maintenance that people don't do. They don't check their spokes. Like he's like, I never check those. And it's not uncommon, so I pick on him a little bit about it, but it's not an uncommon thing that people don't check them. So we're going to spray some penetrating oil on there, and then I will show you what I think is wrong with the shifter here. So the first thing, when someone tells me that they have a motorcycle that's not shifting into the gears properly, the first thing I ask is if they have they tipped the motorcycle over on the left-hand side. Because what inevitably happens is your shifter bends, and then you also put pressure on your shift shaft, which is right here. Now this motorcycle, the shifter is hooked up to a linkage to the shift shaft. So tipping it over and bending this isn't going to put as much pressure on that shift shaft, so that's kind of good. Because if the shift shaft, that's kind of not an easy word to say. If the shift shaft gets bent, then that's going to cause binding, and it could even transmit forces all the way through the engine to the other side, to the shift drum and the shift forks and all kinds of good stuff inside of this engine. But you can see, of course, it's a dirt bike. It's going to get tipped over. You can see the wear here. So this has been bent. He said, yeah, we bent it. I pulled it out and straightened it out. Well, I don't know everything about every model of motorcycle, but the first thing I saw after this was that this little leg off of this, dog leg, I guess you would call it, off of here, is at a angle, which has got this little spherical bearing at an angle. This one over here is nice and straight. So that's going to cause some friction there. It's going to cause this thing to bind up a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure but I'm thinking that this thing should not be at that angle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull this off, and we're going to try to straighten that out. And we'll see if that helps any. I imagine that that is the problem. I was able to hand shift it all the way up into fifth, and he said it wouldn't shift into fifth when they were riding it. So it looks like we need to pull off this Allen head bolt, and then there is a 10 millimeter underneath here to pull this pinch bolt off of here, and we're going to get a good look at this so I can go back and look at the footage to see where everything lines up. Whenever you take one of these either a shift linkage or a shifter off, what I like to do is take the scribe, or maybe even you could just use a Sharpie marker and mark where the split is on here, because this thing will go on in any direction, so it can get confusing putting them back. So we'll maybe just take my nice little purple Sharpie marker and put a dot right there so we know where that goes. Take this apart. All right, we got it removed. One thing that I noticed taking it off was that this was coming off very stiff. This looks like it should be cleaned and lubricated. But anyway, we got her in the vise here, and I don't know what's going to work to try to straighten this out. This is going to be a problem, I think, because this spherical bearing is going to be an issue. Trying to get this something on here to straighten this out. You have to hold the bearing as well. So let me think about it a little bit, and we'll figure out what we're going to do to try to straighten that thing out. I don't see, that doesn't look like it comes off. This looks like it's all one piece, possibly machined on here, like this is peened on after it's been inserted. After struggling for a bit off camera, I was able to get this shifter in the vise here. Got a vice grips on it, and it's kind of hard to run this with one person. And I was able to tweak it where we're mostly in line here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean this all up, lubricate the shaft. It's all about lubricating the shaft. Get your damn minds out of the gutter, I swear. And we're going to install it. We're going to shift through it by hand and see if it feels any better. And if that feels better, then I'm going to add some oil to it. We're going to ride it around the yard a little bit, shift it through the gears. If that works, then on to the next issue. I already used a little bit of the brake clean and some good old grease here. Greased up this pivot. I'm going to say that we greased the shaft again, because and you can see this thing here is at a much nicer angle now, instead of being all catty-wampus. And it feels like it's moving smoother already. So let's see if we can't shift it. That's first, neutral. Second, usually you gotta rock the bike back and forth a little bit to get it to move, which I can't do with one hand. But I'll try to walk it through the gears first. While I had the brake clean out, I sprayed off the forks, so we'll get to that in a minute. Clean them up. And I found a screw for this clamp, got that clamped in. Got this rubber bit back on here where it belongs. And I guess this carburetor does kind of just sit at that angle. I thought it was a little bit off, but that's the way it lines up in here. So we're getting there. And we still got the spokes. They're all lubed up as well. So let me walk this thing through the gears, and we'll see if that solved our shifting issue. All right, it seems like it's shifting okay, but I got it up on the stand, so we might as well just hit up these spokes now. I don't have the proper size spoke wrench for these spokes, but I do have a little ignition wrench that fits on here. And when you tighten spokes, you have to think a little bit backwards, because you're turning this nut onto the spoke, so you're actually going to have to look at it from this side basically and think righty-tighty. If you look at it from this side, you're actually turning it counterclockwise, which is tightening it up. And it doesn't take much. It doesn't take much, and I'm also just gonna snug them. I'm just gonna go around and snug them a little bit on each one. And if I tighten this side, it's gonna affect the other side across from it. So that's why you don't wanna go too much. So I might just do a little tiny bit on each one all the way around, which is probably not the exact right way to do spoked wheel. So if I have any spoke wheel experts out there, you can hit me up and send me some information on how to do this properly, but just snugging them up is gonna be better than leaving them loose, that's for sure. So I'm gonna go around, and like I said, I am not an expert at this, but what I do know is that it's nice to start at a reference point, so you can start at the, you can either start at the valve stem or the rim lock and go clockwise, counterclockwise, and you have spokes on this side of the wheel, you have spokes on that side of the wheel. So you can do all of them on this side and then go around and do them on that side, or however works. But considering these are all kind of loose, I'm just gonna snug them a little bit. So it'll be better than it was. Well, let me play you the song of my people. That one's still a little dull right there. But it sounds better. Sounds better. A little more fine tuning and we'll have it. But definitely something to keep an eye on your dirt bikes. And like I said, even if you don't know exactly how to do it, just snug them up a little bit. It will be better than having them loose, because once they start getting loose, you're going to start breaking spokes. And once one goes, then another one, and it's a chain reaction. So we are going to move onward and upward to these fork seals. So let me show you. This outside part is not the fork seal. This is a dust guard. Fork seals are inside. I have done a video on forks before, replacing these fork seals. But what we're going to do today is we're going to try to clean these a little bit. They may be too far gone. Sometimes this will, if you catch it soon enough, you can clean them and save them. What happens, especially on dirt bikes, is once they start leaking, then the fluid accumulates on the outside, and then the dirt sticks to the fluid, and then that pasty crap from the dirt and the fluid starts chewing up the fork seals even worse. So let's see if we can't find something to clean these fork seals with. So I went through this useless box in the house that said something like wedding pictures. Anyway, I found this. If you're under, I don't know, 25 or so, maybe you don't even know what this is. This is a film negative. This works really good for cleaning out fork seals. You can also use a business card, and they also actually sell a little specialty tool. What you do with this is you hold it against the fork. See how it matches the contour of the fork. And I'll try to get you in here on the action, but I'm not sure how well I'm going to do here. What you're trying to do is feed a corner of this between the leg of the fork and the fork seal. There you go. Can you see that? So I've got it fed in here between the leg of the fork, and this is the fork seal inside of here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go all the way around with this thing, try to feed a little bit more of it in. This little edge here works really good at grabbing dirt and pulling it out. So I don't think I'm going to be able to do this while I hold the camera, but there we go. I can do a little bit of it. It's not easy to do with one hand. That's what she said too. Wow, today is just euphemism day. All right. Anyway, this is a stopgap measure, like something you could try. It's sort of like adding, any of that crap they sell at the auto parts store that says it'll stop your engine from smoking or help you pass the emissions test or that sort of stuff. Yeah, it might work. It might help you get by for a week or a month, but this will probably not solve this problem. So I told the owner of the bike that he should order fork seals, and if he wants to change them, he can. If he wants to bring it by here, I can always use more cold beverages in my fridge and $20 bills in my pocket. So if you have leaking forks and you want to go out riding, this bike is supposed to be out to the desert again this weekend, so that's why I'm doing this. This is something that can get you by. And when I was riding to Alaska on this bike, I had leaky fork seals, and it got me by. It got me all the way back. Actually, they started leaking a little bit again here at home, and I did it one more time, and I have fork seals right over here somewhere in this pile of goodness somewhere. I hope I can find them. Oh, there they are. So that needs to get done on there as well. But this temporary measure has got me by for a couple months. But I caught it early, so that's another thing. If you catch it early, your chances of success are greatly improved. So let me finish this up. We'll pop them seals back down, put some oil in, and take this bike out in the yard and see if it shifts. Well, good news, bad news. Good news is the bike shifts through all the gears. The bad news is it is still not shifting correctly. And I really wish that he hadn't drained that oil out before I got it, because I wasn't able to test ride it. What I do think is happening is something is binding up under this cover. It is most likely in the shift drum. There's a little spring. It looks kind of like a C. In fact, I will try to go over here to this manual. It's not for this bike, but I'll see if I can get a picture and show you all what I'm thinking it might be before I take it apart. But I'm going to have to take it apart and at least look at it. I can shift it up and down all of the gears, but it's not shifting correctly. So sometimes it gets stuck in the higher gears, or it gets stuck in second gear. Let me see if I can find a decent picture and show you what it is, even though this is for a completely different bike. The transmissions are pretty similar. All right, so this is the picture from this DR350 manual, but this is the shift shaft that I was talking about. So that comes out on the left side of the bike, but it goes all the way through the engine on most bikes. It goes all the way through the engine over to the right-hand side, and it engages, and this one's a little bit different than most, but it engages on this shift drum here, and that's what changes your gears. That shift drum moves and slides all these pieces around inside, these shift forks they're called. But what I'm thinking is happening is where this thing engages, there's a spring, a little detent spring or something they call it, that allows this thing to move and then pop into each gear. And I think what's happening is it's moving, but it's not hitting the little detent. It's kind of common. Sometimes there's a bolt that backs out, sometimes the piece gets bent. So I'm hoping that's all that it is, but in order to get to that, I'm going to have to take this side cover off and get underneath here. The clutch resides right here. So we're going to have to pull off the Kickstarter, and it looks like this brake pedal will have to come off. Probably what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take the gas tank off and lean this whole bike over on its side onto a tire or something like that, something soft. It's a dirt bike. It's been on its side before. It's not that big of a deal. That's how we usually do it on dirt bikes. Because I just put this oil in here, so I would have to drain it out and then put another quart of oil in. So no reason to really do that if we don't have to. So I'm gonna let it cool off and we'll get to that. I decided to drain the oil after all, just so I could work on it on my stand. And I've already removed the Kickstarter, and I've removed this brake pedal. So now all I got to do is pull out all of these bolts. And I'm gonna have to try to be careful because there's a gasket behind there. I don't have that gasket on hand, and I'd like to try to reuse it. So I guess we'll see what happens, but this little impact driver works awesome for stuff like this. So quick to take things apart. Now, like I said, this is just an impact driver. It's not an impact wrench, so it's not going to take the lug nuts off. But for small bolts like these, knocks them out quick. Put them back in pretty quick as well. You just got to be careful. This thing doesn't put out that much torque, but putting these bolts into the aluminum case, you don't want to just drive them in there. So when I put them in, I try to be careful and just slowly like that, because you don't want to torque them in there too hard. So all I have to do is get this one out, and then we'll pull this case off. It looks like I'm probably gonna have to pull the starter out too. Now hopefully you all have remembered some of the tips and tricks that I've given you when you're taking off a panel like this, to draw a little picture of it, front, top, because we have all kinds of different lengths of bolts here. So if you just throw them all into your awesome little mechanics tub, then you got to do a little bit of sorting to figure them out. So the extra minute it took to draw this out will save me the frustration of not being sure that I put the bolts back where they came out. So now let's see if we can get this thing off of here. We'll set you down. Tell you what, we'll set you down right there. And we'll try to get you a view. There we go. I think that'll do it. And I see the gasket is coming off. Looks like it's coming off with this, and it's not splitting, which is good. Got to go over this kickstart shaft here. All right, and we're inside. Here's the clutch. Nothing looks obviously wrong with the clutch. And what I am suspecting is an issue is right here, and it looks like everything appears to be where it needs to be, but we might have to dig around a little bit to figure that out for sure. Because if this is where it belongs, then there's bigger issues with this bike. All right, I may have possibly found what the culprit is. This little piece here fits in there, and it was kind of out. Yeah, so far out actually I just kind of touched it and it fell out. So I'm not sure, but that is a strong possibility, because that's what controls the shifter returning to the center when you shift the gears. Motorcycle transmissions are pretty interesting, and I mostly understand how they work. I've been inside it, there, messed around with them, replaced some components. But it's pretty neat how they work. It's a little rotary drum that turns. One of these days I'm sure I'll have one apart. We'll go over it a little bit on the channel here, but I have a sneaking suspicion that that little shaft that holds this spring is part of our problem. I hate to have to take this thing completely apart, but I very well might end up getting to that point. Because I don't see anything else that looks odd. The only other thing that I see that looks weird is there's this weird wear on this clutch basket, which looks like something was loose inside of this engine. I don't see anything else that looks damaged, and I don't see anything that's corresponding in here to that. So maybe that's just the way that that is. Well, I'm going to pull this out, and we're going to mess around with that a little bit and see if we can figure anything else out. Well, I've taken a look at everything else as far as this goes, and I even pulled the shift shaft all the way out, and I released the tension off this detent by removing this spring, and I shifted the shift drum under here, and it seems to be moving freely. So I'm pretty certain that that little stop there, or spring stop, or whatever you want to call it, I'm pretty certain that was our problem. So everything else looks pretty good in here. If you get to this point on a motorcycle for whatever reason, there's usually a screen in here that you can take out and clean. This one doesn't look dirty at all, but they capture a little bit of engine particles and crap like that. This bike doesn't even have a oil filter, so that's the only filter, but that looks fine. So we'll put this cover back on, put the filler back up with oil, and give it another try. Well, I just got done taking her around the yard a little bit, up and down the driveway, even terrorized the neighbors, rode it up and down the street a little bit. Now I can shift it into all the gears, and it actually shifts up pretty good. But downshifting, it doesn't want to downshift very good. You really got to mash on it, and sometimes it just gets stuck in third gear, fourth gear. Now, I've been in this situation before on these kind of bikes, and there's a pretty good chance that there's a bent shift fork that's causing it. And we can go over back here. These are the shift forks. Now that's an internal part. So that would mean that the engine would have to come out. Engine would have to come out of the frame. We'd have to pull the whole top end of the engine off, and then we'd have to split the cases in half. They split this way. What is that? Vertically, not horizontally. So yeah, the whole top end has to come off, and then you have to split the engine in half, get in there. The part itself is not expensive, but that's a lot of labor. So I'm gonna have to talk to my buddy and see what he wants to do. You continue to drive it like this, it's eventually gonna get worse, but it is drivable. It's just not easy to drive at this point. First, second, and sometimes third gear is pretty easy. Fourth and fifth are hard, so that's probably, well, it could be two things actually. A bent shift fork, or it could be this shift drum as well. There's machined passages on this that these shift forks ride in, and sometimes those passages get kind of messed up as well, so then these shift forks won't ride in there and move the gears over. So yeah, each one of these ones, it's usually one of them will be first and second, third and fourth and fifth, or something along those lines. So I am probably gonna call this done for now until we decide what we want to do. Like I said, this little bike is, it's in nice shape, but it's probably just not worth the labor to take it apart, unfortunately. If it was mine, it was sitting in my garage, I might do it for myself, but when someone else is paying the labor, they're gonna have to decide if it's worth it for them. So, tough decision. It's kind of like if you have to give your dog a $10,000 surgery and you just ain't got the money. Yeah. Well, it is what it is. Mechanical things is a lot easier to make that call on than your dog, or your great Aunt Sally, or whatever it might be. Fun in the garage. Thank you very much for watching. Get out there and find your adventure. Adios.